So I was been asking lots of agents this week as to obviously how they're qualifying buyers, because one of the biggest questions that is doing the rounds is obviously how do we generate urgency, right? How do we actually make anything happen with any of them? So I'm asking them, I'm asking everybody what they're asking these buyers, right? And it's the standard stuff to begin with: names, numbers, blah blah blah. But it was to my dismay that at not one point did any agent that I've spoken to actually try to find out the real reason why someone's buying, right? So when we ask, so when generally we're thinking about why someone's buying, the answers generally tend to be first home buyer, upsizing, downsizing, investor, right? That is where one of the biggest, easiest to fix mistakes is happening in the entire game. And the reason why is because that is not why they are buying. That is the buyer category that we have made for them. And we've assumed that that's their why. Now, first home buyers, for example, easiest example, we know that first home buyers could have a multitude of motivations that would make them go, right, now's the time, right? Because they're all first home buyers until the timing is such that it is the right time for them to be a first home buyer, right? And the problem is we as agents are not going that one step further and finding out why that they are a first home buyer right now. Because I think it's safe to say that if anybody has got any sort of notion as to what's going on in the world and they are not committed to doing something in real estate, they wouldn't be in it. There are that many reasons out there, that many excuses to not buy and to not sell, as a matter of fact, right? And so if a buyer comes to your open for inspection and you don't find out why now is the time for them to be a first home buyer, then you are not discovering the motivation that you need to discover in order to have any remote chance of generating urgency, right? So take another example. It could be, right, downsizers. Let's have a think about the different ways, the reasons why people end up becoming downsizers, right? It could be getting old, right? It could be running out of money. It could be divorce. It could be spouse died. It could be want an easy life, want a lifestyle change sort of thing, right? There are so many reasons why people need to downsize, and yet we are not focusing on those reasons because we're too busy categorizing them and then sitting on our hands wondering why we can't create urgency. We've got to get our shit together, gang, because we are not focusing anywhere near enough on the things we need to focus on. It's like what I wrote in an Elite Agent article recently, where I said we've got to stop focusing on the transaction and start focusing more on the reason, on the purpose. And when I've said that to a few people since I wrote it, I'm getting met with blank faces. If all of your language remains in the transaction, remains transactional, talks to the transaction, tries to get them to sell or buy based on it's a great time to buy and it's a great time to sell, because apparently all the time it is the great time for both sides to do great things, right? Fucking pull the other one, right? If we don't realize and find out the thing that's pushing them past all of this bullshit, all of this noise, all of this palaver, whether it's international, federal, state. There's shit going on at every single level, variables amounting to a level of effect that we've never seen before. And so this is the silver lining, my friends. Anybody that you see now is game as. There is some real big reason that's taking them past all of the shit and getting them to come say hello to you. Even if they're a first home buyer, there will be some timing, there will be some purpose, there'll be some reason. It could be they're getting married next year, they've got a kid on the way, they've just moved over from overseas, and renting's fucking expensive, and it's getting worse, right? There's can't stand the in-laws anymore. Getting evicted out of their rental home because they're selling, or whatever it is, right? There are so many reasons why people become a first home buyer. And yet no one that I spoke to this week is taking the time to find that out, which is sad. You want to know
one question.
Huh?
It's just one question, and it's a really casual one. It's like, so why now?
Exactly. It's the
Why now?
It's the easiest question to ask
Yes.
because it's so
and it's natural. It's just a conversation.
Geez, this my voice breaking is not a sign of my adolescence, by the way.
Sure.
Yeah, and it bodes real well for my options. So the simple truth is, gang, that we need to start asking and start getting a lot more comfortable with the question why. It is a problem that affects not, and this is where I'm going to get a little bit soapboxy here. This is a problem that affects not just real estate, but life. Everybody's become so averse to asking the question why, because of either they're that anxious, they just want to know what to do and they just want to go into autopilot, which is fair because anxiety does that to people. But in a professional setting, or in an economical setting, or in a political setting, you watch that absolute basket case that is a government house in question time. All they do is look to win a debate instead of trying to improve the country. And the reason how you can tell that that's the case is that nobody there seeks to understand. They just shout in order to attempt to be understood. And the same applies to so many parts of life and business and real estate. If we don't start asking more questions and more why questions, then my word, you wonder why we're not actually tapping into any level of motivation. The amount of times, gang, that owners are saying recently, we don't need to sell.
Then don't go on the market.
Whenever it's whenever it's a tougher market, so many vendors, sellers revert to that because that is their default defense mechanism, right?
But if you've asked the questions at the listing appointment, you bring them back.
Let's not even go there yet, right? Because I was chatting to someone, one of my clients, and she's good at that. She knows why, right? But even if you find out why, the listing presentation at your should be weekly vendor meetings, you need to be making sure at every single time you meet, you make sure that you align with the why. So before we crack on, I want to make sure that nothing's changed. Is the why still the why? Is this still the purpose? Yep. All right, cool. Let's crack on. Right? Because understandably, owners and buyers, they lose sight of why because they get so focused on what is a tremendously large transaction. right? Same with buyers. They feel less, they think less about why they are in the market now when it comes down to it, and the anxiety of having to transact and deal and negotiate and write contracts and sign off on 6, 7 figures of their hard earned, right? Understandably, anxiety riddling, right? And that's what we're supposed to be here for, is to help people see past that transaction, because the transaction in itself is governed. It's black and white. It can only happen one way, essentially. It's beyond the transaction that our value sits. And I'm not talking about fluffing and saying, oh, we're going to get you removal trucks, we're going to do this, we're going to do that, we're going to do the other. Because let's face it, P&Ls can't afford that fluffy shit right now. They can't. But there is fundamental value that we have within us, within this, within this, and within this, and within these, most importantly. Asking why is paramount to any single action, thought process, suggestion, all of the above. And you need to be encouraging your vendors to ask you why. And the thing is, right, one of the reasons that stops people from being able to have that why conversation is because a lot of the time the reaction's not desirable, right? If you ask someone why, then for some reason there is such a growth in affront. There's such a growth in people worrying that why could offend someone. How the fuck can why offend anybody, right? Why is one of the most beautiful questions that if someone's holding a position of authority and is asked why, then their eyes would light up because they're getting an opportunity to flex their intellectual muscles, right? I did it with my PT. So I've started strength training right this week because I've decided I need to. I want to get big and strong. I want to be a big boy, and I literally I found a PT lad called Liam who recognised me from an auction I did in Beacon. Joe, Beaconsfield auction. The mum that had number 7 that was stood right next to
Oh
me.
yeah,
One
yeah,
of her sons.
Oh really?
Yeah, PT.
Well, she's actually coming to another open today of
Well, tell her.
another fixer upper.
Well, see if Liam's told her that he started coaching the auctioneer.
Yeah, there you go.
Small world. Anyway, I asked him. He was telling me something about something, and I asked him, "Oh yeah, why is that?" And you saw his face sort of go, because he's put a shitload of effort into learning why things are the case. And so, therefore, I didn't mean to do this, I just wanted to know why, but me giving him the opportunity to explain why certain things the way they are, it made him feel validated and valued. So, team, we've got to get rid of this stupid notion that why is an insult. Because it ain't.
The only time why, if you are being asked why, like you said, vendors should be asked, or we should be encouraging vendors to ask us why about things. The only time you should, well, the only time you could possibly fear that question is if you don't actually understand what you are doing to a level where you can explain it to a 5-year-old.
Exactly. It's an Einstein thing. All right.
Yeah.
I
100%.
think if you get asked why, it's especially in a trade, like where you're trading in that, well, what we call trading over here, when you're in that conversation of those things, I actually think it's because they haven't understood to start
Yeah.
with. Sometimes I think it's
Yeah.
I always take when someone says why in a transaction like that, I always don't take it personally, but you're like, oh, geez, let me help you. Like, let's go back a step. Let's explain this
Yeah,
again.
maybe I've not
Not
I've
explained. Like I take it, if you can't sort of really point the finger because three are coming back at you, that person hasn't understood what you're saying,
Mm-hmm.
yeah.
or
And
you haven't
if
put it
we
in a
and
way
we
that they can comprehend it, or put it in
And
a
flip
yeah,
and
decent
but
flip
way.
side to
we
that,
get really good at using industry slang,
and
and we understand it, but no
flip
one else does.
flip side to that though, right? Is if you get a potential customer to ask why, the good side to that, the cup half full version of that is you've obviously said something that struck a chord. So if you
Mm.
suggest something and someone asks why, it means that you are touching something that is invoking an emotional reaction in them, and that's a good thing. So if you suggest something to a vendor that isn't selling for some reason, for whatever reason, and they say, "Oh, why? Why do we need to do that?" It's you could very much see that as, "Oh, they're asking why
They're
because
challenging me.
yeah, because it's a chat, and I know that what they're saying is probably right, but I'm going to ask why to try and defend my position because that's
Hmm.
what I think I should do because I'm protecting my castle. But really, in the back of my head, I'm going, well, I probably need to, you know. So it's a good thing. The question why invokes a reaction. Now, at the minute it's invoking a lot of negative reactions because of what Joe said, which is that if you start panicking, if you start getting nervous, if you start getting on your high horse and egotistical and defensive, that's the word I was after. If you start getting defensive when someone asks you a question why, it clearly indicates to you, you don't have to tell them obviously, but it clearly indicates to you that you need to get back to the books. You need to go and relearn. You need to go and see why you're nervous about it. You got to go and have a look at why the question why is causing you apprehension. It could be because potentially you are giving them a suggestion, a direction that you genuinely just don't believe is the right direction. But for whatever reason, that's what you're doing. It might be because that's how it's always been done. Right. And coming back to my point with my agent friend in Canberra, they said something and then they said, oh, but yeah, but no, but blah, 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 blah. I heard this from, an industry leader a few years ago. That's what we were always, and I went, right. And why is that the right thing to do? Oh, because he's been right a few years ago. Yeah, you reckon the world's changed? So tell me what instinctively would you think should happen? And she gave me the answer that sounded a bit like a home run. I said, why don't you just do that? Right? We should always be asking why on any theory, on any recommendation. If you are learning, if you are genuinely interested in learning and getting better, everything you should do, you are trying to learn, should always come with the question, why? Seek to understand. It is the number one rule of the 7 habits of highly effective people, but we've become scared to understand. Bollocks to that. Because it's clearly that apprehension, that avoidance of wanting to learn why. And again, going to get a bit altruistic here. You could argue it's what's got the world in the mess it's in. Oof, that was big. That was a big statement. Anyway, gang, start asking why, because being a first home buyer ain't the reason. That is what the reason has resulted in them becoming. Do that.